I'm really excited to be with you all tonight. I'll be kind of like facilitating our panel discussion on friendship. And as Emma shared, it's going to be a great night. I'm excited for this panel. The overarching question that we're asking is, how do we relate to friends in a way that's consistent with the way of Jesus? And practically, how do we do that? And our goal is just to have pretty chill conversation, share some stories, share some experiences of how that has looked like for us. And I'll walk the panel through some questions, and then you'll actually have a chance to discuss the same questions in your small groups a little bit later. So the first question for our panel is, how did you choose your best friends and what do you like about them? And anyone can jump in. Melissa, we're having a hard time hearing you. I'm so sorry. Andrew, do you want to jump in while
Yeah,
Melissa
I'll
works
jump in.
on?
I'll jump
Okay, cool.
I think, I think I would say my best friends are my brothers, actually. So I was kind of, I don't know, forced into it, by birth. But, um, I mean, I think just growing up with them and being able to see all the facets of life that they go through and them mine is how we kind of have grown close together and chosen each other to be our friends. But yeah, and I mean, I what do I like about them? I have two brothers, by the way. They're both older than me, but I really like that we're able to say anything to each other, and I think that probably has also something to do with family. But friend wise, it's good to be able to be completely open and be able to speak your mind, whether you are completely wrong or not, and whether the other person is either. It's good to be able to do that, and that's what I like about them is that we're able to do that, be like that with each other.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I feel like a lot of my friends, I feel like I've chosen them because I see like the characteristic of honesty in them. Like that's something that's really important to me in friendships. Melissa, do you want to try
Yeah.
again? You're
Okay,
good.
cool. There we go. Yeah, the green thing wasn't showing up, so I was like, can you hear me? You could not hear me. Okay, well, yeah, so I'd say a lot of what Andrew said. I think like the authenticity is like such a huge thing of being able to say anything and like have those real conversations. Um, I would definitely say Esme, who's not here today, a little shout out to Esme. One of the cool things, like it was super funny last year, we met like over Facebook message because we found each other on like the Facebook group. But like we had a lot in common, but it was like as like the more we talked to each other, the more it was like able to be open and honest and like just have our friendship was really just a place where it's like vulnerability is like accepted and allowed and encouraged. And just like having a place, she's just a person especially who is just like very like anti-shame and very like grace, but then also accountability. And I think those are huge things.
That's so good.
Yeah, Melissa, I would totally echo the having friends that are willing to have those hard conversations. I think for me, and I remember talking about this in my small group last Cru season, like I have never had like that one best friend. And I think that's something that a lot of people seek out. And that's something I've almost had to like mourn in a way in my life, being like, okay, I haven't had like this one friend, like God's had different people for different seasons for me. And so I think having friends that when you can find people who will be real with you and who will be honest with you, that's like so rich and so special for sure.
Mm.
Yeah, and going off that, I definitely feel the same way. Albany, like it's rare, I think, maybe to have just one person that you go to all the time, that you can go to all the time. So when there are friends that you do feel like you can go to, even if you don't feel like they're like my ride or die, as they say in Big Brother, which starts this week. But it's like you can, a good friend can do that. You can go to whenever, and they can come to you whenever too.
Yeah. Yeah, I was also thinking, I feel like some of my best friends, they chose me. Like I remember one friend I met my first year at Simmons, and we were like in the same class, so we kind of knew of each other. And then she reached out to me and like came up to me one night in the dining hall and like asked to sit, and we just started talking. And I feel like that's been true of a lot of friendships. Like I don't necessarily like see a person and then like seek them out, like you're my person, we're going to be friends. But it usually happens like organically through like just getting to know each other in conversation. But I think some of the things I really value when I'm thinking about friendship is, yeah, that vulnerability and like being encouraged to go deep with someone. Let's look at the next question. How does your faith shape the way you love and care for people with different values or belief systems? What has been helpful?
This question is, it's tricky. I because people, I mean, come from all facets of life, especially when like all of us that, or if you haven't moved to Boston yet, eventually you will. Where like it's really everybody. Everybody, it's the city, and coming from all different values and belief systems, like you said. So, how does it shape my faith? I mean, it helps me grow stronger, I think, in it, because when you're challenged, it helps you think about it helps me think about my own faith even more, thinking about, well, if these people are saying, if my friend says this, I have to think, does that apply to what I think and what's in the Bible and what I've learned in church? And then I can grow stronger in whatever that is by digging deeper into it.
Yeah, when I was baby freshman Albany 4 years ago, going to Emerson, I didn't really expect that like no one I met would be a Christian. And that was like very different. All my best friends in college are not Christians. Besides my teammates, which some of them I think are on this call. Whoop, whoop. But I think something that was so simple yet so earth shattering for me personally in those non-Christian friendships was when I would have those deep conversations. I think I grew up in the church, and when I heard evangelism talked about in the church, I thought it was like this, like very purposeful. You start like a certain conversation with someone knowing that's what you're doing. And what it really was like, just when I'm being real with someone and having a deep conversation, if I'm talking honestly about my life, I'm going to talk about Jesus, because that's the most important thing in my whole life. Like that is what impacts me so deeply. And so I just started, when I would have those conversations with people, just talking about Jesus in all of the fullness that I feel it. And I found that people still wanted to engage. Like I didn't have to like fit in and not talk about specific Jesus things, if you will, or not share the gospel if like I'm trying to fit in with the group. I just had to be real about my life and be like, yeah, actually, this is what's impacted my life big time. I don't have to give a whole gospel pitch, but I can be like, this is what's been going on lately. This is what I've been feeling. And it always has to do with Jesus. And my friends loved having those conversations because that was me being real.
Yes, period. No, yeah, I think that's like such a huge thing is like, again, authenticity. Because I think a lot of times, like a similar experience for me growing up in church, it would be like, oh, when you have friends of other different of like other religions, other beliefs, like this is what you do, this is what you say, or whatever. Whereas my experience as I've grown, and especially like in the last year in college, has taught me so much where it's like, no, like those people are actual people. And we can't like try to prepare for those conversations. Well, in some ways, you are like preparing yourself in faith, but you're not, um, really rehearsing life in that way, I think. And also, it's important for me, is like, is letting those people not change my faith, but help me grow deeper into my faith. So it's like instead of just hearing people say something and being like, that's wrong because the Bible says something differently, taking what those people believe and taking other faiths and other beliefs and being like, wait, what does that say about like God? And what does that say about the Bible? And what can I dig into deeper here? Because if other people have questions that I can't answer, then that means I have those questions too. And I should be digging into those. And like that's been such a huge part of my faith this past year is like, oh wait, no, this is a great question. I don't know the answer to that. And honestly, I kind of am struggling that I don't know the answer with that. Um, and that's been like a huge way that God has just worked in me. And then another thing I think is as you're having this conversation is realizing like who Jesus is and how much we have in Jesus that other people don't have. Like talking with other people and realizing that like the concept of grace for other people, of like this awesome grace that we don't have to be perfect and we're not trying to follow a bunch of rules, is huge to a lot of people because like that's not a thing for most other people. Like that's not how it works. So that's a huge thing for me.
Hmm. Yeah, Melissa, I feel like you touched on humility, like being able to admit, like, maybe I don't know the answer to this question. And I feel like that can like build trust if you're just honest and upfront about like, yeah, that's a question I have too about my faith. Like, do you want to talk about that together? Or I should actually go and like spend more time researching that on my own. And Albany, I really like what you said about like faith being something that's descriptive. Like you're sharing a part of yourself. It's almost like you're explaining like what the relationship is like with a member of your family or like another close friend, because it is that like meaningful relationship that you just want to share and explain to someone else. I love that. Let's go to the next question. What are the friendships in your life that challenge you the most, and how have they helped you grow?
Man, this is a dumb example, but one time, and I've told this story to a couple different people here. One time I was eating with a friend, and she looked over at me and she was like, I don't know, like I think she watched me order and it was like a very complicated process. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. She looked over at me and she was like, are you a picky eater? And I was like, no, of course I'm not a picky eater. I'm like, that would be dumb. Like, I'm not a picky eater. She was like, oh no, I wasn't saying in an offensive way. Like I was just asking. And that's like such a dumb example. But just in having like people willing to ask like dumb questions like that, but also like, oh, how are you doing in your faith? And like this thing that you're struggling with, what like how has that been this week? Has like significantly changed like my life because people are people are very specific. People are very like, I don't know, keeping me accountable in that way is very cool. And it's super funny now because whenever I go to like not eat certain foods, I'm like, I'm not a picky eater. I can eat this if I want to. I can totally eat this. I can be brave, which is a cool thing to see for sure.
Yeah, that's good. I love when friends just like call you out. It's just like cut through it all and they're like direct question. It's good.
Yeah, there's definitely that times where it's just being straightforward and having someone call you out is really great. And a a close friend will do that, and that's what I think of a good friend. I would not say I'm a picky eater either. So, but I don't know if I'd call anybody out on that. But anyway, I think also one thing that's just challenges me is something that Melissa was talking about in the last question is just like friends that do come from. I mean exactly what we were just saying in the last one. I think it applies here too, and that friends with different belief systems and values challenge me a lot. Just I prefer who? What is Joel saying? Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Uh, Just yeah. Just my friends like living different ways that challenges what I think, and then just that makes me go to other friends and go to the Bible and spend more time in prayer about everything to understand things, because it's good. Life is confusing, but yeah, I think there's that direct and then also more of a non-direct way.
I agree with you, Andrew. I've had like definitely some friendships in Boston, especially where people just didn't believe anything related to what I believed, like religiously or even morally. And I felt challenged by that. But I think on the flip side, I've had specifically, we had a fan friend who was a lot older than me, but she just had like the most joy of anyone I've ever seen. And it wasn't challenging in the way that it was like hard for me to be around her, but it was challenging in the way that I loved being around her so much that I wanted to be like that. And I do think it started to shape me a little bit and being like, so you can have more joy than what I have right now. Like Jesus has even more for me. And I think like having friendships like that and being able to ask like, what do I see in this person that reflects the Lord? And maybe that's, I'm seeing this because he's calling me higher. And I do believe like since knowing her, I've become more of a joyful person because I saw that there was more. And similarly, I'm friends with one of the quarterbacks for Wake Forest, and he just has so much joy too. And I think I'm even reminded when I hang out with him, like, wow, there's like some really great godly people out there that have some really amazing joy. And that's like, I think God nudging me and being like, hey, like you see this in them. And I'm also asking you, like, where does your joy come from? Like, are you digging into this when you're around other people? Because it's easy to let the world muddle you down. So God's going to say, here, let me bring people in your life to remind you like the way that I can allow you to live and the attitudes that I can bring into your life.
Mm. Yeah, those friendships can be really powerful when we have people in our life who model like joy or love or patience in a way that's almost convicting, because that's something that like maybe I'm struggling with right now. I think another thing I was thinking about in terms of challenging friendships, two things. Like the first thing is that I think some friends are actually really needy, and I've been challenged to kind of like put aside my own time or preferences, or like even desire to be like heard, just to be present for them and to love them and care for them in their like season of maybe needing extra attention or time or love. And I know that I've been in that same place where I've needed extra attention and love and someone to listen and ask me questions. And so I think sometimes there are friendships that are challenging because it feels like just a lot of giving. Um, and yeah, that can be kind of draining sometimes. And I think the other thing that can be challenging is friends that know you really well. And I think my tendency that I'm actually processing right now is to kind of like build up walls and keep like a safe distance so that someone doesn't know me, like fully know me, so that they can like call me out when I need to be called out, or kind of like see through the facade that I put up. And so I think that's another way that I'm challenged in friendship, or friendships that are challenging, is when someone really knows me, and kind of all of the like risk that like that feeling of risk and vulnerability of being deeply known. One countercultural way of Jesus is forgiveness. Where has this been difficult for you, and what has helped you?
I mean, I think forgiving takes practice. um, it's learning to forgive just takes. Oh, sorry, that's real loud. The more I forgive and learn, the more I have relationships with people where I have to ask for forgiveness uh, of dumb things that I'll do, the easier it is that I'm able to forgive someone else, because you know I now have sympathy and uh, but even without that, it can be challenging. And I think starting with just verbalizing it and start by saying words of forgiveness, and then eventually, I think your heart, my heart grows into that. The more I say it and then pray it, um, kind of like it goes in a order of time, if that makes any sense.
Hmm.
I think a thing for me is like a lot of times I don't even want to admit that I'm hurt, or like I don't even want to like make someone feel bad that they hurt me even, which is like such a weird thing. So it's like I if something someone does offends me or something, I think I have a tendency to just be like, oh, it's fine, brush it off. Um, and a moment that happened even within the last week is like someone had texted me and been like, hey, I said this thing to you, and like it's been eating me alive all day. I'm so sorry. Um, and like realizing that instead of like it is a healthy process to forgive and not just be like, oh, it's no big deal all the time. Because I think there is something that's very powerful about being like, oh wait, yeah, that was kind of hurtful, even if it wasn't like hurting me as bad as it's hurting you. Like thinking about it, like that was something that hurt me in the moment, and I'm really glad you brought that up because like it's important to have these conversations and it's important to acknowledge um, things that are like not great. And I think that is probably one of the hardest parts of forgiveness is me is like for me is admitting that something's not good. Um, and I think something that has helped me has just been like encouraging other people to like accept my apologies genuinely rather than brushing them off, but then also accepting other people's apologies genuinely. Um, and practicing that too, I think is a huge thing, as Andrew said.
Yeah, I love what you said, Melissa. That's great. I think one thing that I tend to do is forgive and forget. I think that's something that I just want to do, and I don't know how healthy that is to really forget, but to learn, like what Melissa you just said. So thank you for sharing that.
I I think the world that we live in now teaches us to like walk away from friendships that aren't giving anything back to us. And there have been a few specific friendships in my life where I have felt like I am supposed to stay in it. And that just taking those people in small doses for my health, but saying I've watched other friends walk away from these people over and over again. And so I'm choosing to still invest in their life and to still um, share with them and care for them and text and check up on them. Um, and that one's a balance because anyone you hang out with is going to influence you. But I also think that part of forgiveness is like God saying, like, hey, if you see that people are just walking away from this person, like that's not who I am. Like I choose to love those people still.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. And I agree. I think that someone in the chat said, Melissa, you're wise beyond your years. And that's true. And Albany, I feel like there's a lot of wisdom packed in that too. Like investing when you feel called to a relationship and trusting that God will kind of sustain you through it. I also wanted a follow-up question. How are you all with like conflict? This is a little bit off script, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, how is conflict for you in friendships? How do you deal with that? Are you conflict averse? Do you like just
So
Are you
bad
okay
at
with
it.
it? Yeah.
So bad at conflict. Like as I said before, it's like it's hard for me to even admit that something's not okay because I don't want to have to acknowledge, like I don't want to have to like possibly make someone mad at me. Like I don't want to have that. And I just overthink everything so much. But I think a really cool thing just in the past year of like moving away from home and then like starting to like adult um, and all of that kind of stuff from like making my own decisions, doing my own thing has required a lot of like boldness from me. Um, even like just a little example for me, like oh no, my battery is running low. A big thing for me is like I am terrible at resting. Like I'll just say yes all the time, and I think part of that is because I'm like afraid of like people being upset at me. But then like a huge way of practice that is just like actually saying no actively, like like a lot, like just being like no, I can't. And people don't hate you for it. Like I feel like I overthink that, but again with conflict it's like you have to practice and you have to recognize that like my identity doesn't come from what other people might think because I'm speaking truth, like truth and grace and truth and love, but my identity doesn't come from what other people think.
Uh, I played club volleyball in Florida. I'm sure that that is a niche that not many of you know about, but it's a very drama heavy environment with a lot of people who just tend to create a lot of conflict, and 16-year-old girls already create a lot of conflict on their own. So that's kind of where I came from even before friendships in college. And I think especially women, there's kind of a easy culture that you fall into of if Melissa and I have a conflict, I go to Evangeline first and say, oh my gosh, I'm mad at her. Oh my gosh, this is how I feel, blah, blah, blah. And there's an element of being able to process to help have someone help you learn how to communicate best. But I think often that is only used for the purpose of talking someone down and saying things behind their back and spreading rumors. And so I think it's very important to like model for those around you and for your own friendships health, like going to that person first. Like I should be sitting down with Melissa and saying, this is how I feel about XYZ interaction we had. This is how I've been feeling about our relationship lately, because just being willing to like confront someone directly first makes a huge difference in conflict, in my experience.
All right. If y'all let me be real a second here, I'm going to tell you something that's happened recently in my life that I did not handle conflict well. So the past few months, I've been, I don't, I didn't understand why, but I was like slowly becoming aggravated with um, my brother Michael. And I did not. I just pushed it. Thank you, agitated, and I was pushing it down and ignoring it, and eventually I started letting it like slip into talking to like my other family and my friends, and Esther, and I was like I was like kind of not talking good about him, and it got to the point where there was I think I naturally do this where maybe a lot of us do where you just kind of shove it down because you don't have to acknowledge it, you don't have to confront it, uh you feel like you don't have to, but that just like grew in me over months of time, like throughout the year. And it comes out eventually. And I was last week, I kind of just lashed out at him, and he was like, what's going on, Andrew? And I didn't even know what to say. And then I kind of talked through it, what was happening with him. And then I apologized to him, he apologized to me, we had like a good conversation. But like ever since then, our relation, I mean, it's been a week, I'll talk to y'all next week and see how it's going, but it's been much, but like we're able to actually open our lives up to each other, starting to again, even though, and yeah, so it's been difficult, and I do struggle with conflict a lot, but eventually if you can get to it early, get to it so it's healthy. I don't know.
Thanks for sharing, guys. I like that, Andrew. Like, just confront it sooner rather than later. Don't let it just like bubble and simmer under the surface. We have 2 questions left. And you can kind of choose to answer one or the other or both. But the first question is, what do you feel like God is teaching you about relationships right now? And or if you could send a message to a younger version of yourself about friendships, what would you like to say?
My message to my younger self is 1000% text people first. Text people when you want to hang out with them. Tell people that you want to spend time with them, because I spent years of my life being afraid to just text somebody, I'm not doing anything Tuesday and I want to hang out with you. That was terrifying for me. And ever since I just decided, like, I'm just going to go for it and be okay with the little rejection feeling I get if they're busy. I've had so many great times hanging out with people, and I have found that people enjoy it when they're sought out. People enjoy being wanted. So why am I not texting people that I want to like see them and that I care about them and want to spend more time with them? So I wish I learned that earlier.
That's so good. I love that, Albany.
I think I'll try to answer the first one. I'll try to answer both of them short, but God's been teaching me a lot about like what it looks like to be, I think being okay by myself and hanging out with myself and hanging out with God is like a huge part of like having successful and healthy relationships. Because I think a lot of times whenever I like try to hang out with friends, hang out with other people because I'm feeling alone or like out of necessity, sometimes it can almost get to a point where it's like, well, I don't know, just like I think just being satisfied being by myself and being satisfied, um, like doing things, exploring Boston alone sometimes is a cool thing to do. And that's a huge part of relationships in general. If I could send a message to my younger self about friendships, I would say like it gets so much better than how it was, especially for me, junior high, high school times. Like I struggled with my Christian friendships and my relationships in general because it was like I always wanted deeper friendships and people who were like really invested in their faith, and I didn't really have a lot of that. Um, but God has worked in really, really cool ways in the last year where it's like literally I could not be more happy with where I'm at with my friendships and the friendships I have, which is really the coolest thing.
That's awesome. Andrew, any final thoughts to wrap us up?
Being vulnerable helps to create strong relationships, and I would definitely tell young Andrew that, and that's something that I've learned in the past few years, and am grateful for that. Yeah.
That's so good. Thanks, guys, for sharing, for being a part of this panel, and thanks everybody for watching us, for being with us.